I'm Mark Z, and you're watching Thorin, the best interviewer behind Travis Gafford.
Right, this is going to be episode 22 of Elitists United. Guest for this one, Cabochard of Team Vitality, the resurgent Team Vitality. Team Vitality, many different iterations. Before that, he was in Gambit Gaming. Before that, don't give a fuck, didn't know him. So just stick with the present. Stick with the present now. So, right, we better start there, Cabochard, because the interesting thing about your team is, after I think it was like 0-4 start or whatever it was, this split, every single person in the whole league wrote Vitality off. Like they said, you were completely done. Everything from spring was like, well, the joke is, right, in spring, when you used to win the games, it was like that meme from Breaking Bad, like, he can't keep getting away with this. And eventually everyone thought, right, well, they haven't. They've got caught now. Good. Right, we figured them out. They stopped bullshitting us all. We know what level ones are now. Now we can all beat them. And that was working for a while, but the comeback has happened pretty good last few weeks, right?
Yeah, I think many of the problems that we had the last splits hit us even harder during the Chinese bootcamp and the start of the season. So that's why we started much later, picking ourselves up than the other teams, I think. And yeah, we had those games last split where it's backdoor here, someone going 20-0 this game.
Sure, yes.
For sure helps us getting some wins in the bank.
Can you give us some insight in that? Because another thing is, right, from the outside, it's very easy if someone doesn't know exactly what you're trying to do to think that you are just doing cheeses in all these games, and that you're just doing a wacky setup to throw someone off. What's kind of the philosophy of Vitality? How do you guys try to play?
I think it was our core way of playing the game was our downfall. At the same time, it was what made us go to Worlds, I think, last year and get these wins in Spring Split. It's we are playing very aggressive, these winning matchups and pushing forward. And most of the time, winning, one lane was hard winning. It was Jisoo, bot lane, or me. And in Spring Split, most of the time, Jisoo or me. And we had issues playing through bots, and we stopped at some point trying to play. And I think that's why as well we went 0-4 at the start of summer. But no, I think our bot lane is playing much better. We can actually play with them. They communicate so much better with Mowgli, and it's been showing. I think now in their 2v2 is actually very good.
Veteran, even if some of these games that they were having, did you lag out a second?
I did. Or
there you go. Okay, you're back. No, that's all right. Even though in some of the games Vitality had, especially in spring, obviously as they were coming into summer, it looks gimmicky and it looks like they're gambling on some of the moves that they make, especially what the jungler was doing. To some degree, though, they obviously also did have a read on the concept of accelerating the game, right? So they were doing some things that made fundamental sense.
Yeah, so the characterization we've always had of Vitality here is that you guys were kind of the gatekeepers, as in if you didn't understand early game, Vitality would just shit all over you and ball straight to the Nexus. And Splice were the late game gatekeepers in that sense. If you understood late game, you could beat Splice. If you understood the early game, then potentially you beat Vitality, and you had to beat both to be considered a good team. So when you guys started not doing so well early on in the split, then it was basically okay, maybe most teams now at this point have a grasp of early game. And there are definitely some teams where if they do well in early game, it also seems unstoppable versus them, like G2, for example. You guys and G2 both have a pretty similar characteristic in this way, in that if you fuck up an early game against either of you two, it's pretty difficult to make a comeback. But you guys have always gone for really heavy lane-centric setups. And the big thing now, because I'm glad you mentioned the bot lane, is that you guys have switched going from the tank supports that you had before, like Nautilus and stuff, to going to Fiddle and stuff like this, where you can get really heavy priority and go for these early Drake contests. You actually did really well versus G2 on an early Drake contest. Versus XL, it was kind of a little weird what happened. It mostly seemed like a really bad TP from top lane that just gave you a lot of advantage, and then they just entered around Herald. But versus G2, you really saw this change in priority on the bot lane actually give really huge dividends to you guys. Obviously they got the 2v2 kill off, but the fact that you played around that pressure and got a lot from the Drake contest and forced G2 to fight on your terms, and then they obviously fucked up, I think that did a lot more than just the fact that G2 picked Garen. G2 picking Garen didn't really do anything for that whole all of those bot side plays that are happening. It was more like a change in focus that you guys did partway through the split. And because a lot of teams haven't really been focusing on bot side plays, teams that did start doing it, like Rogue and XL, actually did start netting some wins just off of this. So I think you guys are kind of like in with them on that kind of bot lane train. Yeah.
And I think as well, to go back to the G2 point as well, you can add up the way Mowgli did his early passing. I think was they controlled the first blue buff and then they went back for the second one, and it just gave a lot of space as well for bottom to just make these plays. Whereas before and at the start of summer and even more in spring, it was like when we tried to make this play happen, we didn't do it properly, and then it was too late to try to do it good. So it was full dark for them, and they didn't have the space to play better. Yeah.
The blue buff thing is actually really interesting because you and Rogue were both doing this, and then Rogue, for some weird reason, in the last 2 weeks, decided that they wanted to go for like Sonatarm and bad bot lanes like this on blue side instead. I have no idea why, because what they were doing previously with just going like Ashtarm or Lux Sivir or stuff like this bot was working out so well for them and making blue buff centric plays. XL, on the other hand, don't really do that kind of thing. Their bot lane just kind of like wins, and then they do play accordingly, but they just kind of have more options. So like you and Rogue are actually doing something with your pressure, whereas the thing with XL is that they're not really forcing around like jungle invades, they're more forcing around neutral objectives, and obviously like that fucked up versus you guys. So I think the blue buff thing's quite interesting because there are at least 2 teams that were doing that. So.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we identified as well as our main issue is that even in the games we were losing, like throughout spring and the Chinese bootcamp, etc., it's like we still had the good moments in the early game where like we're getting advantages. Just the moment like from 10 minutes from respawn to like 15, it was just all over the place, and really we were doing like just either throwing the lead or not doing proper macro, and that's why we went to try to play a bit more simpler way, which is like either Karma top or something to just have one way to focus on and just move onwards with it.
I wanted to ask... go on.
I mean, I was just going to say that my only worry would be that when Vitality have good streaks, that it seems to me like most of your streaks are dependent on something specific that comes from draft. Like a lot of these advantages you get in early game are predicated on draft changes that you guys make, and eventually people will like figure out what that is. Has always been the typical issue. Like the first split that you guys came on, it was this whole red side priority thing. Like most people weren't really paying attention to how heavy the matchups you were picking on red side were, and once people started picking red side away from you, that became a bit of an issue. Right now you have this fiddle thing going on. Are you like worried that if the fiddle thing gets taken away, that maybe people will start exhausting the options you have to play around bot side? Or
yeah, but I think we are as much aware of it as they are, so we just have to go to the next step and just try to find the new Rise, the new Jace, the new Fiddle, the new whatever that's coming.
So.
I have a question. Cabochard, what do you think about Wanda picking Garen in this game?
What can I say? We expected more like the Renekton or the Kled was banned, I think. Maybe Yorick or something. But yeah, I guess he saw the sign in the crowd and he just went for it. But I don't think he enjoyed the game so much, playing against range and just getting pushed the whole game.
Because I have something to say on this topic, right? So, first of all, it's not like this is something... Okay, so it would be easy because they lost a game for everyone to say, this was a bad pick, but, like, I thought when I first saw it, aside from the story, yes, of picking it in the crowd, which I even thought was like, maybe... When I saw it happen, I thought, they're just doing this because they also wanted to do it anyway. I thought maybe this is something where, someone in LPL just played it for one game and it looked good, or some, unknown Korean player played it in a match no one's seen, which is the ideal time to bring out a pick like that, like you actually know it's a real pick, but they'll think it's a troll pick. If you go and look, every other major region, I haven't counted LMS because who gives a fuck, but the other 3 major regions, nobody has ever played Garen in this split. Like, it is not a champion being played. So as far as I can tell, he did just play it for the meme, just to fuck around.
I think there are better setups if you want to play the Garen. I think AmazingJ was playing it 1 year and a half ago. It was like, if you play into a bruiser and you can get your Black Cleaver or something and move onward in mid-game, you can do some things. But against full kite comp and against Karma Klepto, you're really not going to do anything. So.
Because the thing I have to say is this. I have like a mini rant, but it's not one that's like... there's no big conclusion that comes out of it. Basically, here's the thing. Based on what they did... essentially, as far as I'm concerned, this is literally a troll pick. Like, on some level, they didn't throw the game. They obviously tried to win the game when they were inside the game, but in the draft, they did basically do what may as well be throwing the game. But this is the problem I have with it, right? Is first of all, there's no way to ever actually prove that. Like, at the end of the day, you're allowed to pick any champions you want and in any role. Like, you can literally draft any comp you want. And so, for all I know, you can always claim, like, the big problem is if you admit it, if you just claim, well, that's what I wanted to pick, then I have to accept that. It's just that here's the problem I have. It's not on G2's end in theory. They won all the other games. It's their prerogative what they want to do. If they're top of the league and they want to fuck around, it's up to them. The person who would be mad is like, if I was Origin and I saw that game, I would go fucking mental. I'd be like, wait a minute. So you played me for real a few weeks ago, beat the fuck out of me, and then you play a team I'm literally in a playoff race with, you fuck around, you give them a win. Not entirely. Obviously, again, you had to win in the game against them. Like, and I'm sure G2 probably still thought they'd win regardless, like they've done with a lot of weird comps, you know. But if I was someone like Origin, I'd be like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Like, you're not even going to play seriously when you're at the top of the league. What do you think, Veteran? As I've implied, I don't think they should be punished for it because it's the same thing as in Counter-Strike, mate. In Counter-Strike, if you ever get a group where it's a round-robin group and I've already won the games to win the group, and let's say I want to specifically lose my last match so I get a different opponent in the playoff bracket, you know, those ones where you know, like second plays first from another group. If you ever do that, I always used to say to the players, as long as you don't admit publicly you threw the game, you can always just say you didn't play well. Like, there's no way to check. We can't do like Minority Report and fucking check what you were trying to do or something. Like, we have to just accept it. So, in theory, I don't think you should be punished for it. I just feel like it's kind of bad sportsmanship, you know.
So, two things. Number one, whereas obviously the Garen pick was pretty true and they didn't have options topside because of it, I don't think the Garen pick ultimately cost them the game. I do think that what ultimately cost them the game twice now, this split, is that both times that you remove early tempo advantages away from G2, they can't do this very specific mid-game setup that they really like to do, that I honestly can't think of specific counters for right now, outside of maybe the fact that you can catch jungle support easily, even though their timings. But they look like any other team from behind is the thing. They look like a very unique team ahead, but they look at any other team when they're behind. And the tempo that you guys actually acquired this game was all around bot side, not around top side. You could make the argument, obviously, that if top side was unlocked, he could have tried to make like TP plays bot side or be more sacrificial towards it or something like this. But ultimately, I don't think the game was decided based around top lane play or the Garen pick. You didn't really transfer any pressure bot side. The second thing is that when we're talking about whether or not that we punish, I mean, I'm obviously cynical, but this is honestly true. It's not about whether you can judge for sure if they intentionally threw the game, because you could obviously just go on their tweet and find like grabs saying, "Oh, if you guys put a sign, we'll just pick wherever," you know, like all of this stuff. Obviously, there was some
circumstantial evidence,
yeah. But it's not about that. It's about who complains. And if enough of the people who are competing for a playoff spot complain, then Riot will have to do something, because these are their customers. The customers are not the audience. The customers are the franchise owners.
That would make sense.
So it's just about who complains, how many complain, and if it's big enough that Riot suddenly start looking like they could potentially lose money if they don't do something off of this. So do the owners care as much as the teams themselves do? Probably, possibly. Do enough of them care to make a big enough of a noise to do something about it? If they do, then G2 will get punished. It's not going to come down to whether G2 actually did do this or not. It's going to come down to whether Riot feel like franchising could explode off of this or not, or they could lose a substantial amount of money, or this could look bad to future investors, which is what they really don't want, the people who will be buying into the franchise in the future. It's always going to come down to that. I am really curious though, Cabo, like if you were on Rogue or Origin or at one of these other teams that is competing to go in, and you saw G2 do that versus another team, like would you complain if it hadn't happened to you already?
It's hard to tell. I feel like we've been kinda in the same setup before, where like with the Giants remake.
Oh yeah.
So,
god, yes, actually. Holy shit, actually, yeah, I forgot about that.
But so I don't know. I would feel on the other side, yeah. But yeah, as you said, there were times as well where they picked the Annie and it worked. I think Annie worked better in the setup than the Garen did in our game. But yeah, ultimately there have been like playing with this, and it does work many times. So.
Like the key distinction for me, like I said, was just the fact that like it affected other teams. Like if you do this in a best of 5 and you're just so baller you can do it in one game. Like I give you an example of one that famously failed, Veteran. The whole reason my boy fucking Loco Doco has an IEM World Championship trophy is because for some fucking reason Kuro had to pick Yasuo, a champion he'd never played, in game 2 against World Elite because they were 1-0 up and they thought, fuck it, they're never going to beat us. And obviously, famous last words, they did win that. And in doing so, he thought he'd only committed one sin, trolling a game. He committed the ultimate sin. He gave TSM an International League of Legends trophy at a tournament containing a Korean team. He will burn in the fires of hell for all eternity for that. So, you know, I think that will be his punishment, luckily. I don't have to myself punish him. Riot doesn't have to punish him. He'll carry that in his soul forevermore. So, and also, karma kind of fucked him, didn't it? Because he's like literally the most abandoned member of the Rock Tigers now. Like, no one, he's literally off in China just being a guy in China playing League of Legends. So, anyway, Cabo, to come back to Vitality, another thing I wanted to ask about is you referenced it there. You guys went during the splits and you did this boot camp with Royal Never Give Up and you were over in China. Mm-hmm. Now, what was that actually like? What was the concept of this? Was it just literally like the two teams just practice each other? Was there anything more than that behind it?
It was us wanting to experience another kind of bootcamp because we went Korean bootcamp twice in a row and just trying the Chinese server as well. And at the same time, RNG giving us their showing us around and giving us at the local and playing with them. So it was the combination of both. And yeah, we enjoyed actually the Chinese solo queue. I liked it a lot.
Because there's people just going ham all the time.
Yeah, for sure. 80 kills at 20 minutes is the standard.
There we go. What about, are they one of those teams? I forget if RNG is. I know some of the teams have unbelievable looking headquarters in like practice area. Like I think it's EDG are the ones that have one that looks like Star Trek The Next Generation. It's like
OMG have the Star Trek one. The Star Trek one. EDG do have like the Half-Life 2 tower, but OMG are the one where it's all like neon glowing inside.
The RNG local, they are really great. I think they are like so big, but they're like bigger than the studio in Berlin, and that's where they play some of their matches, and just the whole setup, the whole place where they have everyone is insanely big. And we realized in China how actually crazy esports was and League of Legends was. And
what was the actual practice like?
It was just like in Korea, or like if we were to play here. I think it's just we get to play with them. And like with other teams, we got to play like top esports, and Jizuke really wanted to play Knight, for example. And
sure,
that's something you can do when you're over in Korea, but it's easier in China, I guess. And we didn't stay that long. We stayed like 2 weeks, and we spent some days in Beijing as well with the RNG people. So like 10 days of practice, pretty much.
Okay. Did it actually help coming into this split? Did you pick any things up?
As you saw, we started everything great. We'll do again.
True. Fair play.
Did you like any of the top laners there, though? Like, how was top there compared to like the European top laners?
Top as well. We could feel it. I mean, when we were in Korea for Worlds, we already screamed many of the Chinese team, so we already like got a taste of this before. Mm-hmm. So it was just renewing it kind of. It's good as well. As we said, top esport.
He means the top laner.
Yeah, I mean the other top laner.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, you mean off top esports?
Yeah.
No.
Right. I meant.
Yes, he means 369, the guy from top esports.
Oh, okay.
It was a very good top laner, by the way. Except he actually got subbed out this split.
I don't know anything about China. So.
Well, the interesting thing is, Veteran. The interesting thing is actually, believe it or not, top in LPL is actually probably the strongest role in the world. They have a lot of really, like, that's the thing people don't know. It's not just the Shy, you know. It's not like the Shy doesn't even style on everyone every game. Like, he is a very, very good player, but he has games where, like, this is the thing actually that people never knew about RNG, sadly, because they only know them from Worlds, was that guy Let Me basically was like the Chinese Impact. He would just literally like limit what would happen if he played against the Shy, and you could just win against the Shy's team because the guy could absorb the pressure. And then elsewhere, they actually have some really good carries as well. So sadly, it's just that those aren't the teams that go to the international tournaments so far. So I hope this year you'll actually get some of them because they have some really good players in that position. And I actually think Europe might even be second for that at the moment, to be fair. Like, Korea's a bit of a mixed bag. So That would be interesting. What about that then, Cabochard? Because that's one thing. Despite the fact, as we've alluded to, people were very cynical about Vitality of the team. When I say people, by the way, me and Veteran absolutely included. Like, we've been flaming the fuck out of you on most of these episodes. But I'll just say it to you first. I'm not a two-faced person like that. When we flame your team, though, I do notice everyone always does individually give you a lot of credit. Like, a lot of people thought last split you were behind Wonder, like the second best top laner, maybe even make a case for you. What do you think of your own play in Vitality?
Yeah, I think I for sure played really good. I think even the last World and like the end of summer last year, I started actually making a case for myself, as you said, but it was more focusing on leading the team and just having this laid back role while I'm like trying to shot call more, and the meta made it so much more easier because you're like playing Siren or On, and you just had to like manage 4 people because you are not playing the game yourself. And coming into Spring Split, it was much more playing Jace and playing all these mechanical champs, and I didn't as much take a part in the shot calling role. So I'm trying to get back to it and as well have the mechanical skill next to it.
Because the thing is, if people don't know your career, you've made a very interesting transformation. Because I remember the early days, like when you were in Gambit and in the first Vitality, and there was no, I will give the other lanes their picks. It was like everything must come my way. The jungler must come my way. Like it has to be that way. Famously, the example I always give that reminds me of this was when Vitality was doing really good, and then Riot just changed the whole meta, and then where you had to try and play like Nautilus top or something. It wasn't a good look. I'm just going to say that playoff series, I wish the Men in Black guys came in after that one, and then we could all just forget it, right? Because that wasn't a good. Like the old Cabochard was more of a hard carry guy, right?
Yeah, for sure. But as well, I think I tried to hard carry in metas where hard carrying was the way to go, I feel like.
Sure.
And even though you made this video about playing through Forgiven in Gambit and everything, I think the meta was really about playing through top lane. And so
it was at the time, yeah, for sure.
And so was it, I think, the first playing with Elitists. So that's why I really felt like I was in place. And yeah, when the change happened with the Nautilus, yeah, I remember this, yeah. Let's not talk about this.
Exactly, yeah.
And then that's why coming into last year, the meta actually helped me focus on this part and trying to be more complete and just not have to play the carries at all for almost 1 year, because like we played Jace for like start of spring, but then it went into 7 on meta and Ergot later on. So I could 100% focus on doing this, and I think that was Yamato's job coming into last year, just trying to push me to that direction.
Yeah. You know something as well, by the way, is that's interesting, Veteran, is the reason you know that Cabochard is understood by his opponents to be a good player is, do you want to know how many games in official competition Cabochard this year has played Aatrox? One of the main picks numerous times in the meta, so sometimes the strongest. How many times do you think he's played Aatrox this year?
I don't know. Tell me. Hit me with it.
Once. And it was this split.
My God. I mean,
isn't that ridiculous?
Fucking cancer overpowered.
That's ridiculous, though, isn't it? He's had it once.
I mean, it's a bit.
Is he just permed against you, Cabo? Did they permaban it or something?
No, that's against Wipo. Against me, I'm more like we try to find another way to play the karma and play these supportive champs, and okay. I think they do well into Aatrox as well. So that was a good way for us to go.
I have to say that like the best thing about Cabochard, both this split and last split, and including like, for example, the Akali game, you actually de facto got a lot of resources just because Expect TP'd bot at like the worst, most pointless moment in the history of man, is actually your side laning. Like the decision making that you have based on how you play side lane in mid to late game is probably, I mean, it's one of the best in Europe, if not the best in Europe. And that was the thing that was so consistent about you last split. Like, we were hating on Vitality last split as well, but we all basically unanimously agreed that you should have gotten the MVP at the end of the split, because I don't think anybody had like such a mastery on a team where, no offense to the rest of your teammates, the rest of your teammates just quite frankly don't. In any sort of aspects. And it got really kind of confusing when I was trying to do like my tier list before this split. I ended up putting like Wander at S and then you at A and then like a bunch of people on like B and a bunch of people on C, because it just didn't feel like right to put you on the level with most other people. And I think that you wouldn't have the ability to play side lane as well as you do if you weren't essentially trying to match Huni back when you were on Gambit Gaming. And I think that a lot of your careers ended up making you really strong at this aspect of the game. And I think it's an aspect of the game that a lot of more, I guess we could say, supportive players underrate. Like, for example, Finn is coming in right now, and he's really good on what you'd expect to be like the carry sort of champions, where he should be really good at siding, like Kled and stuff. But his decision making mid to late game is nowhere near as efficient or as good relative to both his champion and to the map as Cabochard's is, and that's being like the big thing that's been holding him back. But Cabochard doesn't have that problem, and it's a skill that's also useful if you are going to play tanks or more supportive champions at some point, because you will make the right decision relative to map pressure and relative to your champion, whether to go straight bot or go straight mid or vanish into Fog of War or make one of these decisions. Like, you're very consistent on that particular thing. I don't think he would have got that if he wasn't demanding all the resources that Gambit Gaming like he liked to claim for. And so
I was not. They were given to me.
No, to be fair, here's the thing. Listen, veteran. I will say I said that jokingly. The actual real answer, and again, all of us in this chat know forgiven. The real answer is his coach was French. His name was Sean. So as far as I can tell, I'm not even sure he was a coach. I think he was a fucking sleeper agent just installed by Cabochard. So then Cabochard could say, "Forgiven, look, I'm not even asking for it. The coach says it. I'm just a good teammate. You know, what can I do?" And then he was like, in French, he just goes like, "Yes, continue doing that. Continue, comme ça. Continue comme ça."
I was saying in game, play runs forgiven, please. What are you doing?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Well, just a good teammate, aren't you? So, anyway, the good thing is, though, you solved that problem. You got a bot lane where you don't have to worry about that anymore. What is it like in your team, actually, by the way? Because the weird thing about your bot lane is, obviously, it's had these big ups and downs over the splits. There was times where people thought they were doing pretty well. What is the concept within your team for how you're playing at the moment? Is it supposed to be through the side lanes?
I don't think we decide one before the game. I think it's more of how we want the draft to go, and then when we're fiddled, for example, we know these opportunities are going to come much more than if we have Severe Alistar or something. But I think the bot lane right now is playing really well, as I said. And to go back to the point before where you said how to play side lane, I think it's really important as well to notify. I'm playing that style now since Mowgli joined, whereas last year it was more the tank player, and Mowgli coming from the playing with Keen, he had already that when he joined instantly that
right.
Okay, if we play to top lane, this is gonna happen like this and this. Kinda like Rainover and Woonie when they did it was very fluid.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically you think that you had a really good kind of pre-built synergy of Mowgli, just because Mowgli had been on teams with your kind of player before, but that it took a while for him to have that with bot lane, but you think he has that with bot lane now? Or...
Yeah, I think you can say that, yeah.
Okay, sure.
I mean, for sure, we didn't have it through spring with bot lane. That was very visible for everyone, so...
Sure.
And yeah... If you want to take again the game against G2, the way they set up the gang bot and everything, it's much more clear. And we have to work on our mid game. If you watch our game against Excel, it's crazy. Or we don't pressure more when we have that big of a lead, and we have many things to work on. But playing through one lane, no, we can actually I think do it through all of them, so we can move on the mid game now.
Sure, makes sense. Do you view it as a bot centric meta right now then?
No. I think when you see the strong picks like Akali, Irelia, and everything, you can.
Yeah.
You don't have to play through. But I think the moment bot lane becomes so strong is when they start casting Raptor and Wolf, and you press tab and they have 100 CS on everyone, and that's when they strike, I think.
Veteran, I mean, I would personally say at the moment, just because of the champions that are being spammed in mid lane, you're not going to hard play through that much at the moment, but it seems like in theory every lane can be played through.
I mean, yes, but in different scenarios. I think there are periods where you should play around bot, but I think that your priority should mostly be on getting your top carries ahead. I'm very sure it's a solo lane centric meta. The mid is just kind of facilitating which one of these two side lanes it is right now, while everyone is in a Zir Corki mode. You very rarely outside of Splice see people just spamming Kiana or Akali in the mid lane. Like it just seems to be it normally is that you have to play through mids towards one of these two side lanes, but all the champions there are really tailored to it. Whereas top lane, does have all of the carries, all of the snowball dependent matchups. Like you yourself, like you have said that you've played more supportive champions, but outside of like Karma, the rest of these aren't really supportive. And let's be real, Karma isn't really played for the purposes of supporting right now. That is a pretty fucking strong side lane champion at that point. So I do think that it would even be better for you guys to like keep playing around top. But when obviously if an Infernal Drake spawns bot side or your blue side, in which case very viable to play around blue buff around the bot side, then you guys should be able to do that. And you guys did show on both those counts that you could do that against G2. And you did give a lot of credit, obviously, to their synergy of Mowgli in this, but the initial 2v2 kill, for example, was like kind of classic Vitality decision-making in terms of you just see the opportunity and you just balls to the wall, go for it, and you punish G2 for it very well after that point with Mowgli. But the initial things did come from the bot lane and somewhat came from the draft. So I'm glad he did it that game, but you should be even more confident because you have pre-existing synergy of Mowgli, because you should keep playing around top side, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I say supportive pick like Karma, it's of course like Karma and Nico, they have this strong laning phase on top of being the support there, and Karma even more than Nico, she scales like insanely well, and that's why I think you see, for example, this team's not being able to come back against Zyrak and Karma or something. It's just because when you arrive at 3 items just pushing mid, you cannot go. They will kite you like crazy, and you can't engage, but they can with Rakan, and they just scale so good that I meant more Karma in supportive, that you can't be side by yourself at some point because you get to scale by all those bruises and everything. So.
Okay. Right, a team we actually don't on this show get to talk about much is XL, because obviously originally they weren't very good, right? But this would be the perfect week to talk about them, because not only have they won 3 of their last 4 games, but the one loss was against Vitality. So what do you think of XL? Because it's obviously a squad that's changed players up. And it's funny because obviously Rogue and XL were kind of the laughing stock of the league last split, and everyone thought they're free wins if you play them, you know. But if you look at the changes they made, both look like they've improved. So what's the new XL like, do you think, Cabochard?
I think all of them actually, even more on those 2 last weeks, they have been playing better. Kadrill as it's like the Silas game with insane now ults. I think Expect is actually quite underrated. His main problem, I think, is that he plays too much for his team. As we saw in the game against us, it's like he's sacrificing his big lead just to TP bot, and in the end, he's just like it happened as well the game before against Place, where it's like he's always trying to rotate, and it's like to the point that it's just too much, and he ends up losing. But he's always gonna be there for the team. But in the end, he's gonna lose a bit, and it's gonna add up. But he has a good laning phase. He knows where to be. I think Expect is good, and the bot lane is playing better, and not that they are sticking to these two and not having to rotate Yalan and Cassing.
Yes.
And Mickey is like a bit hit or miss. I feel like he has this insane plays, and some of the time he's gonna go 0-5. So
I think the particular issue with Mickey that you guys were able to abuse, and it's also somewhat an issue of Expect, but like it's less apparent, is that both him and Expect seem to go and group up to get vision in River a lot without Cajal. Like when Cajal is just off doing Wolf Camp or something, they'll both be doing it. In fact, specifically Cajal being off doing Wolf Camp happened in both the Splice game and the Vitality game. But the thing was that in the Splice game, Xerxes, like, I don't know, like threw up all over his keyboard or something, and Mickey was able to like get a kill there. He traded 1-for-1, but like he should have just been dead there. Like she had no business doing it. And in those pockets, you guys can just catch these guys out. And Vitality obviously would do that, because if you make consistent errors like that versus Vitality, even last split, they would just abuse that like nothing else. So there does seem to be like a lack of synergy between Cajal and his solo lanes right now. It's a little bit strange, but that's currently for me the only like big issue with XL. Otherwise, obviously, their new bot lane is like going really, really well. You worked with their old bot lane, didn't you, Cabochard?
Yeah, they were in Vitality.
Yeah. I mean, what do you actually think about swapping out this bot lane for them then? Because you said that you thought it was like better that they kind of stuck with this. Was that for like a skill thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, recently they've not been playing as good as they were. I think when they were in Vitality, when we all played, actually, they were really good. I think we had a really good split, and I have really nice memories of Yalang being a great teammate. But lately, they just have not been as good as the rest of the league. So
Sure.
I think
So
I meant more they stick to two people and they just go along more than
Yes.
yeah, like I think if they stuck with these two, then they wouldn't be in the horrible situation that they are right now. They may still be in a playoffs race, but it wouldn't literally be at a point where they can't lose a single game, and then still they need a couple of other things to go correctly. They're not mathematically eliminated yet, but it's still very slim odds. They were developing so well towards the end of last year. I have no idea why I didn't do this. And like you were saying, how your bot lane kind of getting it together now with Mowgli has really helped out. Just subbing these two guys in, they now have the option to do the kind of like plays around bot lane that you guys are able to do. They obviously don't do like the blue buff thing, but their bot lane does actually get ahead. They do actually play laning phase out well. They do abuse other bot lanes, and that gives Casual things to do instead of just playing Olaf with Mickey burning flash at level 1 and bot lane just inting it on the tower permanently. Like, I mean, we're away from all of that. Now they actually have options early games, so.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you said. They play these comps that are not so hard, but they just stick to one goal, and that's why as well. Like we lost to them the end of spring is like they had the Yasuo Gragas setup, and even though we were really ahead in laning phase, at some point they just group up and start throwing everything, and like they just brawl us to death. Yeah. And about the bot lane, just one thing we didn't really understand about the draft against us is like they completely left out Yumi and they decided to blind Tam, and that their bot matchup was really bad because of it. So I think
the Sona Tom. Oh yeah, no wait, that game was against you guys. Yeah.
No, they had Ezreal Tom against Lucian
and we had
Yumi.
Lucian Yumi. So yeah, bot lane matchup was really free.
Oh, that was this week. Yeah. It's just
week.
that like I referenced when I said he was playing Olaf with like Mickey burning flash and his bot lane just under tower perma. That was actually versus Vitality as well. Like you guys are 2-0 up over XL now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the first game I referenced was that, so I thought maybe you were referencing that again. But yeah, I don't actually have like a full opinion on the draft. Maybe I bring it up now, but I mean, I don't really have anything else to add to the XL point. So much.
What do you think about what about the expect
so
angle then?
I mean, that's kind of like, I have no idea why he burned TP bot side. So when he burned TP bot, first off, that kill is always going to be better on Ezreal than him. Next off, they were essentially 3v2 already by that point because they got a fairly fast kill on the bot side. All he did was TP at a point where Cabochard can just take, like, did you take 2 platings, I think, on that? You took like 2 platings and denied him 2 waves. Then he comes up with just 1 kill. Fan-fucking-tastic. This is honestly the dream scenario for Akali at that point.
Spoiler, by the way, if you're a casual fan, not worth.
Yeah, it was not worth. Like it blew my
I know on the scoreboard it says you got to kill. Not worth. Mathematically, does make sense.
Obviously, you've identified that as like he plays a bit too much for team, which I think is like a really polite way of putting it, because I think that decision was just wrong in general. And I again have no idea why he did it.
Yeah, but I meant more in the way because when you listen to the mic check as well, when they have display like Mickey going 1 versus 3, is like he's ready to TP on display as well. Like he's always looking to be first on the, and it's more like the Koreans, they play a lot like this, where like the more before than now, but the top laners, they're both ready to TP, and when the fight starts, they insta TP, they don't hesitate, and that's the way he's deciding to.
I feel like that works out really well before shit like turret plating was in the game. Like before shit like turret plating was in the game, you could even potentially just give up tier 1 towers, and it could be better depending on the composition that you had. And this is like something that obviously LS like gets off over, you know, is the idea that you just like play like in a really narrow sort of plane on the map and you give up towers for it. But now that turret plating is in the game, I don't think you can view the game like that. I do think that you have to play like a wider map, and I think that tendency from Expect, if it's a holdover from his time in Korea, is one that he absolutely has to eliminate. Finn is also having this problem right now. Prophet didn't really have that problem. Prophet isn't like aggressive in lane, but he's not the kind of guy that will like overgroup, you know, and give up advantages. Like he actually played side lane out very well. But Finn is like aggressive in lane but doesn't play side lane out well, and Finn is more likely to just like do the insta TP. So it's like I don't know. I don't like players that have this kind of tendency now. I think that it's not right to have that tendency now, and I actually love the turret plate change because it punishes this kind of thing, which I don't ever think was optimal. I didn't ever think it was healthy for the game. I'm glad that he can be punished by you just staying in lane, to be honest. Like I think he should keep playing wide. So yeah.
Okay. What about, obviously on paper we had the marquee game of the split, which was the revenge game, G2 plays Fnatic. What do you think about this matchup?
G2 Fnatic, what was it? The Pike?
Ricky X had Pike, yeah. Reckless played Karma again.
I think it was really interesting the approach. Wait, my PC went off. Okay, never mind.
It's just after 10 minutes it'll go in like screensaver mode or whatever, yeah.
Right. I think the approach G2 had was really interesting. That they're like, we know what you're gonna play, you know what you're gonna play, and we're just like gonna draft accordingly to discount for picks that both you and us want you to play. So they're like, we give you the Aatrox, we give you the TF, we give you the Karma, and we have something ready for it. And in the end, I think the top lane didn't go as well as they would have wanted it to. Like, Whippo actually played lane good, even though I think he overstayed because when Wonder has to TP that early on, then Whippo keeps laning with like one Dorans and he doesn't get that much of a lead. They end up going even when Kled had to be like out of Skull for like the majority of the laning phase. And then they read the Pike first pick, and I mean we play Fnatic next week, so we'll see what we do.
Sure.
I feel like Fnatic had the same tendency that you just talked about with Expect a lot in the early game, where they're all willing to just drop everything to go in on that kind of play, that kind of reactive play if they have to. They got really heavily punished by G2 just before the mid game came about. With that, with Whippo like TPing into the mid lane just to fucking die after I think Hylissang got caught out and Voxer got caught out there. That just turned into like a cavalcade of int, you know, which happens a lot versus G2. Like one of you dies, everyone tries to do something about it, and then everyone fucking dies versus G2. But I think outside of that, the game went more or less as could have been expected, and it was actually really fucking interesting to see these two teams play styles clash, because when G2 do a mid game rotation through mid lane, that's normally like after they've done their vision setup. Like they will essentially send jungle support in to get vision set up on River on one side, and then they will move across mid towards the other side to trade that vision for a play on the other side. But Fnatic, on the other hand, will group all mid first and then transition towards the side lane to set up. So like mid lane is like the starting point for a play for Fnatic, but it's like an impasse for G2. And as a result, after G2 were kind of ahead on the play, it just became a fucking bloodbath mid, because Fnatic were permanently trying to get mid priority so they could force something on the side lane, and G2 were constantly trying to move from their side lane towards mid lane to try to like get to the other side to make a play, but it all just ended up clashing in mid. So it's kind of the bloodbath that turned out in the way I expected. I'm not sure if the Kled pick is supposed to hard counter Aatrox. I can see the logic in the recent patch, because he should be good against champions with innate sustain right now, but I think Aatrox is just way too overtuned at this point. I honestly think it's the best top laner in the game, by the way, Cabo. I think you could literally just blind pick this into any matchup.
I think it's safe. I think the way they changed his ultimate, I think it hurts his team fighting part, but his lane at some point is gonna be strong. Like he can hold most of the matchups and scale good. Yes, and it's a good pick. And about the G2 Fnatic game, I think it was interesting to see once again that again G2, it feels like when you get an advantage, it's not that big of an advantage, but when you make a small misstep, it's actually huge. Like they make a kill bot, but it ends up not getting that much of a prio or snowball or anything. But when Whippo oversteps in mid, instantly it's like 4 kills into Nash control, into like the game is almost over. So.
Yeah. Like, that even was, like, the third kill that they got in that whole round event. Like, they killed Hylissang and Broxer just before that. And when they, because of the way that the whole, like, mid lane thing was going, Fnatic were essentially forced to play a 4-1 for once in their lives, which they've been, like, allergic to. They normally play this weird, like, 2-0-3 setup, where they just completely ignored the other side of the map existing. And in that was when Hylissang kind of did his int, but it was really strange because that was the first time I'd seen them actually go into a proper 4-1, like the entire split. And then Hylissang seemed to forget how he should play in that, like leaning well away from the Twisted Fate. It made no sense. I saw a lot of flame with regards to how Nemesis could only play TF in the draft. Obviously, Nemesis does have like champ pool issues, but I don't think the TF was like what lost them this game. I just think that G2's fundamental style is better than Fnatic's fundamental style. And people asking where the damage was going to come from this, and it's going to come from the same place that it came from last time. Like, that Aatrox the day beforehand was literally 1v4 before Karma, Corki, or any of these guys were able to arrive for like 10 full seconds. Like, people are really sleeping on this champion. I don't think the loss of Corki was too big of a loss of DPS to cause them to lose this game. It definitely was not the reason why they lost this game. So
yeah, and TF in the end is gonna put the damage as well. You're gonna shield him, and he's gonna gold card with Fire Cannon, and it's a nice duo synergy they can have. It's just they lost before that.
Sure. Okay, what about the Schalke team? What do you think, Cabochard? Because obviously Odoamne is someone you've been playing against for many, many years now. It's a regular matchup we've seen in the LEC, the LCS as it used to be called. What do you think of Schalke at the moment?
I think Schalke is good, but I feel like they're never gonna win against the top teams because they always have this kind of same style where they're gonna pick a good comp, and they're gonna have a good setup around either Drake or Rift most of the time, and they're gonna get these kills here, but they're never gonna create momentum or pressure elsewhere most of the time. Like, they're gonna have one gank with Flash, for example, the game against was it Origin? They have this gank bot, and then it's just straight to the Drake fight, and they have a good Drake fight, snowballs into Rift fight, etc. But when you see against Fnatic, when the other guy gets the setup first, like they have no one pushing for that pressure anywhere, and they just get, little by little end up losing it. So, and then there is sometimes upset being really fed, carrying late game or tipping in enemy base, I guess.
What do you think about the way they've been using Odoamne in their team?
I think he has a okay laning phase, but after many times he's not at the right place, or like we saw the Nar game, he didn't play so good, he didn't engage at the right time, and he went too forward sometimes. So and then some game they just put him on Nico Karma, and it doesn't matter how many times he dies, he's gonna be useful. So.
Thoughts, Veteran?
I mean, Schalke only have like 2 modes. Like, do we have mid priority? No. Gank mid? Yes. Okay. Gank bot. Like, this is it. That's all that Schalke really is early game. I feel like it would be a nightmare scenario for you, Cabochard, if you were playing in it. I think it is a nightmare scenario for Odoamne, and I don't think he's being able to wake up for 2 splits now.
I can give you a piece of trivia on this, actually. When I had Dylan Falco on Listen Loco, the way it works for someone like him is because he's actually a very soft-spoken guy. You can tell he's the sort of person who doesn't normally have like people being abrasive like my persona is. So when I said initially, like, you know, how are you using Odoamne in your team? He was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you know, people would say that, you know, he's a pretty good player. He can do a lot of things in the game, but you basically just leave him on an island and don't know that top lane exists. And he goes, that's a fair criticism. It's like, that's all that needs to be said right there, Veteran. Like, as soon as he says that means, like, if anything, because of what I've done there, basically, Veteran, is I've used, like, business strategy. I've come in with such an aggressive initial offer that to even get, like, a reasonable... he has to sort of, like, meet me halfway there. Like, yeah, okay, maybe we're fucking him a bit, but here's the reason why we have to. And then he gives you the real info. So I think they're aware of this problem, Veteran. Like, I would go ahead and guess, unfortunately, they're focusing too much of their efforts on trying to get Trick and Abadage going. And that's like the core aspect to they think that's the problem with trying to become a top team, right? It's the biggest flaw they have compared to the others, right?
Yeah, that's because Ignar cannot function without mid and jungle heading towards his lane in the early game. Like, Ignar will go in regardless. Like, you need your jungle and your mid laner around him, and he basically demands it, and he has on every single team that he's ever been on. Switching up the jungler to Trick from Memento was not going to fix that. If anything, Trick fell into this exact same trap on the last team that he was with Ignar on. So, yeah, the way that teams started beating Schalke last split, when they realized they only have these 2 modes, was that they just beat them at step 1. You don't have mid priority anymore. Congratulations, we'll gank mid even more than you. What's your bot lane doing? Oh, it's fucking dying because they don't really understand how to play 2v2 properly. You guys actually were the first people to really abuse this. You just played really hard from bot to mid instead with Tom Kench. You got priority bot side, and then you just translated that into mid ganks perpetually, because Schalke don't know how to do that. They will never go bot first and then translate that into mid. They tried doing that against, I think it was Fnatic. Yeah, they tried doing that against Fnatic, but it was like the first time that they'd ever done it, and it came to some really fucking funny moments where Abadage and Trick couldn't even trade aggro properly, and Ignar was like not quite there yet. He was like 10 seconds off, so the whole play was like out of sync. You could see that they were really uncomfortable doing this kind of playstyle because they've never really done it. And actually, I think Vitality are the first team in Spring that really abused this huge weakness of them, and that weakness still remains. Like it slightly blows my mind that they've been able to do so well this split. They haven't really changed so much. They're kind of my litmus test for thinking that maybe Europe isn't really so strong right now. But obviously we have like Origin collapsing because they're doing like a different juggle path every weekend. We have Rogue like went like up and down. It's like really fucking weird of them. And obviously you guys in Vitality did not have a really good start of the split, so the standings look really strange right now. I don't think Schalke should be there. It would actually worry me if Schalke were able to go to Worlds, then I basically call it that we all have to all in on G2, because I think this team will get destroyed internationally. There's not a single way that other teams will not notice what most European teams have noticed, but all those guys will act on it perpetually. So.
I'll give you a counterpoint to that, so you don't lose all hope. If they go and somehow they beat an NA team, at least it'll be funny. That's the thing about me, Veteran. I'm not a negative guy, you know. I can always find the positive in every scenario, you know.
I mean, I don't care if we beat an NA team or not. I don't care if we.
Wait a second. You just managed to literally mute everything you said there somehow. When you put your head up, like it cut everything you said.
Oh, I said like I don't care if we beat an NA team. I even care if we lose.
You did it again. For some reason, the second you go to say we lose, it cuts out. Like the world doesn't. Basically, the internet doesn't want you to be able to say it. Exactly. Like God is like, Veteran, you've said enough. I'm gonna have to cut you off here, because he knows if you say the epic line, I don't even care if we lose. That line will now, when people will see this next, is in a meme video, and then it'll go do.
But if I did, that would be the first fucking thing I bring up to Cabochard, is why the hell they win 0-2 in group stage to Cloud9. But I don't really care so much, Cabochard. Okay. I actually forgive you because I care more that you guys were able to beat Samsung and drag them down. Not Samsung, it was Samsung, and drag them down with you. You know, like I care more about
Gen
that.
G at the time. It was Samsung, but
Gen G, but yeah, I care more about that. You know, like I always care more about that. Like we shouldn't really define ourselves by how well we do against a region that our players retire to. You know, like we never should.
You have to realize, Cabo, you didn't even need to get out of that group, mate. Like you could have. There was a chance. All that matters is though, your job basically was like the movie 300. Your job was just to throw that spear so they could bleed a little bit. Exactly, yeah. And then that's it. You've done your job. Then everyone else believed, and then they all came in and fucking did work. Basically. Even you guys made people believe so much. Even a North American team thought they could beat a Korean team after that, and did.
True.
Fucking hell.
True.
Fucking hell.
There you go.
Exactly.
But still, like, I mean, it would worry me if they win. It would honestly worry me if Splice went. Like, Splice showed in 3 games this split, and I am counting, that they can have a good early game plan. But it only happened 3 times, and in both those times, the game went above 30 minutes, and in one of those times, it still went beyond 35 minutes. And in one of the other ones, it was only off 35 minutes by like 12 seconds. So I'd still be worried if they went to Worlds. Like, honestly, any reality where Origin doesn't get their shit together, I may start shitting myself. If you guys go over there, then hopefully you at least beat some Korean and Chinese teams in groups again before you, like...
Wait a minute.
Just go
listen, Veteran, I know he's on the show now, and you might like him as a player, but let's not start getting crazy where we're making like Vitality's got a fucking spot locked up. Like, Veteran, you are aware, there's G2, Fnatic... Splice. Why have I even had to mention Vitality yet? What, you're just boosting them up in that group, are you?
I just said, if they do, I will also panic. I will also panic. I didn't say it would be a fucking good thing if they did, by the way.
Okay. Right, fair enough.
Not panic, we have 2 weeks.
Okay.
There you go. Yes, you can still not make playoffs, and then I won't have to worry about that. I have to worry about fucking Rogue making it there, you know? Rogue make it there.
Reasonable. Who do you actually play?
If you compare us to Splice, the game we play Splice, actually, we have a pretty bad early game, and still we managed to come through mid game. So we I think if you watch our games, we have all these mid game issues, but if we fix them, actually, I'm confident in our international chances.
Splice have the same thing right now, by the way, where their mid game is like dog shit. But their late game is good, and you have this where like your early game, like clearly you guys can just pummel through people if they don't understand something about early game. But then your mid game, it all kind of collapses, and then when we get to late game, we get that fucking Splice versus Vitality game again, where it just that game got so weird. Like when you guys went for like the backdoor bot, and they're just waiting for you because of course you guys are going for the backdoor as two. You know, that was such a funny game, but it was also like, okay, if either of these two teams get to Worlds, I may start panicking. I may just like pray to every god that I have to give all the power to G2 because it may be a bit doomed. Like that wasn't your finest moment, you know? That wasn't.
The thing is-
we could have ended the game by like 6 occasions maybe, but we decided not to judge too much on these mistakes and rather take the positive that we translated the bad early game into a good mid game for once. So
hooray!
that's
There
what
you
we
go.
did.
Sign of progress. It's all good. 2
Thank
you.
phases down, 1 phase to go. You know, but if you never hit that phase, it's fine. Which has always been Vitality's mantra. We don't care about late game because we never hit it. We end the game at 20. It's all good.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you look actually at the playoff race in Europe, right, obviously Vitality is above the other teams anyway, generally, right? If you look at like OG's below them, XL, Rogue, etc., right? Basically, OG's the only team that has an easier schedule. Aside from that, Vitality has like a middling schedule, and then the other teams that actually need to get in, the Rogues and the XLs of the world, and not Rogue rather, the Misfits, they have really hard schedules. So actually, in theory, it's up to you guys. If you already have the game lead anyway, you have like the okay schedule. Like basically, you're probably gonna have to lose to one of SK, maybe even also lose to Schalke. So if you lose to those teams, you probably shouldn't be in the playoffs anyway.
Close to
your
SK
hands,
for sure,
right?
yeah. Schalke, they're still like fourth now, and
Sure.
when they have this control around Dragon or something, they actually
Okay.
manage to get things going. But they will for sure get into playoffs. But yeah, we need to be able to beat them to go further than not only looking into playoffs, but looking into going to more than quarters and everything. So yeah.
What have you actually thought of Sakura, who's come in as the top laner for SK now?
I think actually when they joined at the very moment they started, I think he played good, but I think maybe like the fact that SK has lost 9 of their last 10 games or something just maybe is making everyone play less aggro or something. And as well, since we play them next week, we haven't been screaming SK for a while, so I'm not sure he's been doing like last 3 weeks or so. But at the start he was playing better than he's now watching from LEC games, I think.
You don't have an opinion on that, Veteran?
Oh, I mean, my opinion on SK is that actually Dreams did a lot more for that team than people gave him credit for. Like, I actually think that all the strength people saw in Pyrian actually came from Dreams. And now that everyone plays to top side, or most people play to top side, including SK with Sakura, Dreams isn't able to do his roams from bot to mid like he was before. And now Pyrian looks really weak. Because he isn't playing with Giga safety. Like, SK are one of the first teams that were consistently bringing their support up at the appropriate timing to contest Herald, you know? But all of these kinds of options happened because they would pick a hyper carry on Crown Shot and they would play really hard around bot side. But they can't do that now. And as a result, they look a lot weaker than they did before. You identified that they don't look as aggressive, but they can't look as aggressive because they were playing with a numbers advantage made up for by Dreams beforehand, and now they don't have that. So like that's just my opinion on SK. That is more to do with like the Dreams difference. Like the Dream is dead now, I guess, would be what I would call an article if I was to do one on them.
What do you think of the mid lane change they made bringing Genax in? Obviously, I will say as a disclaimer, it's harsh to judge someone who's never played in LEC when you just get thrown in right at the end of the split on the worst team. But in context of that, was it the right move to make?
Yes, and he picked Aatrox, so he has fantastic taste in champions. And I actually talked to him after his first game, and he was actually very self-critical, which is good. He was self-critical on the actual right points. These weren't just like really broad-based, yeah, I guess I didn't pressure enough kind of things. Like he was like, actually on this wave I should have done this. Like he's actually, he has a very good future if he keeps taking each game like this and not just like collapsing if he fucking loses or thinking he's invincible if he wins. Like he is clearly a developing player. But I actually have a lot of faith it will develop properly. I do think his play was worthy of a rookie mid laner in the LCS. Obviously, we have a lot of really good rookie mids right now, but putting him on stage, like if Abadage was already at that point, then I think Schalke would be a bit more confident right now, you know? So I am glad he's in. He's not even like the best of the mids that you could have even taken from the German league, for example. I still think that Zaze is better. But I am glad he's there, and I think it was well deserved. And I don't understand why I didn't bring him on with Sakura, because they had a really good system going on SK Prime, at least early game. Mid game, it very much collapsed. You think your mid game collapsed? My God, was SK Prime's mid game giving me cancer every fucking time it was on my screen. Anyway.
But why don't you think it's possible to play Trubot? I think you can. I think SK have not been showing like to play much Zyrakan, for example. But
yeah,
for example, RNG bot lane, if you like Zyra Nautilus, you're still able to play, I think, through bot lane and translate.
I don't think you're not able to play through bot. I think that Rogue got a lot of success playing through bot, and I think they should have continued doing it. I do think it's a solo lane meta now, so if you are able to, if your bot lane is smart enough to actually get advantages themselves in the pockets that they can afford themselves relative to where the enemy jungler is on the map, then I think you should prioritize playing around top side, so long as you can play through mid with mid jungle properly. And there are still reset timings on bot lane that you should be playing for that can help you get mid, but it doesn't seem to me like SK is able to do this unless Dreams is permanently on Pyrion stick, or at least wasn't able to. I'm not saying that you can't play through bot. I'm saying that all the strong snowball matchups, the decisive matchups, are top side right now, and that is a fact. But you can still play with a strong bot and get strong advantages on bot, especially on blue side. I'm not saying that you can't do it, it's just not optimal to do so. I do think Zyrakan are broken, for example, but I think outside of that, it becomes like Ezreal lanes, and then after the Yumi nerfs, I think that's kind of like it. Obviously, you guys have like a fiddle thing going, but you are pairing that with Xayah, for example, a lot. I don't think that there are a lot of really strong bot lane matchups that will then go on to decide the game for you. Even the way people are using Sivir right now, we're only seeing Sivir come out as part of like a wide map setup in the 1-3-1 or something like this. Whereas top lane will be, like obviously in your game it was Akali, it will be the Aatrox that Fnatic are using, it will be Kled, it will be something like this, and it's better to set up the map so that guy comes into mid to late game as strong as possible, then go through bot.
Yeah, I think it's possible, but if you really want to push, if you're in your head, you're like, we have to play through bot because he's gonna set up our mid laner to play and etc. I think you can push to have this matchup and go as far as playing like Caitlyn Lux or something when the Lucian Yumi is out, the Rakan Xayah is out, just to, if you realize that you can force through it, and if you have Aatrox top, it's not necessarily gonna snowball faster. I think.
On blue side, I would, because there are more instances than just resets that I would want to play for. But other than that, then I would want a strong bot lane so that I could play for resets on bot side so that I can get mid control out of that window, which is what Fnatic do, for example. Ish, sort of. They don't really play for resets bot side, but they do secure like a bot matchup where Reckless can at least just be there kind of AFK, and they can move Hylissang for priority mid and then into top side plays. But the purpose of that is still to make top side plays is the thing. So I do think that you should go for like a strong bot lane, but I don't think that should be like the end goal. The end goal shouldn't be to snowball bot. The end goal should be to use it for priority for your solo lanes, for the benefit of them. I mean, can you think about AD carries that would actually hard carry the game over a top laner right now?
I mean, it's all up to how fast you're getting these plates, I think, in the end. But if you have the Caitlyn Lux and, I don't know, like Sylas mid, and you get the good 2v2 and threat and dive all the time, you can get the bot Thorin like very, very, very quickly. Yeah. But yeah, at the same time, if you have Akali Aatrox top matchup, it can go...
Yeah, like I would rather those platings go to Akali Aatrox, you know? I would rather those platings go to Kled, to Kiana, to any of these sorts of champions. Any of the champions you played, like you played 3 Jace games. I would obviously rather that the plates go to Jace than even to Xayah, who I think is probably the strongest bot lane champion right now. I don't see a scenario where I wouldn't rather that. The only scenarios where I would then be playing super hard around bot would be if it was a pre-10-minute Ocean Drake or an Infernal. Otherwise, I don't think I care. I think I care if like Dan is able to one-shot people on Vladimir later on, more than I care if the Sivir is able to wave clear a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it's always better because when you see RNG play, for example, they don't care as much about they just pick the Rumble mid or Lulu mid or whatever, and they just threaten so hard dive bot that even if you play it through top, your bot tower is gonna be done at like 5 minutes, and then
They do have Uzi Eye as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but that actually
There is a factor, you know.
But that fucked them up though. Like they will because they have Uzi Eye not do what you were able to do on Gambit, which is alpha the living fuck out of the coach and then force him to make you play around you. They
Allegedly.
They are actually.
You guys aren't speculating.
Of course, that's our job. That is what we do on this show.
Come in the house next time. I invite you.
Okay, right.
They are. Do you guys all have the scripts? They are actually like at Uzi Eye's like beck and call now. Ever since Firefox was removed from that team, because they did show that they could play around solo lanes back when Firefox was on the team. But after that, they started just only playing around bot, and that was incidentally the correct way to play for most of the year up until they qualified for Worlds, and then it became a solo lane meta. And what did they do? They kept playing for bot, and then Wonder is on the Aatrox and Perks is on the LeBlanc, and the map is going fucking AWOL while they're still trying to get Uzi Eye fed. And then in Game 5, they aren't even able to fucking do that. Fucking Hyun and Wadded are able to fucking play better than they are at that point. Yank is able to play better around that. But that was what fucked them up. They kept prioritizing bot side, so I don't think you should use RNG as a litmus test for whether or not you should play
the meta
bot
was
side.
very,
That's
very
fucked them up
different.
before. Yeah, it was a solo lane centric meta though, and we're in a solo lane centric meta now. And RNG
Worlds,
didn't recognize it both times.
At Worlds, it was not always solo lane meta. I think when you are playing the Cyan and the On, like the game we played against RNG, for example, the game we won, it's like it was completely useless to try to snowball the Cyan On matchup. I think as soon as the Urgot and Aatrox were out,
Yeah,
you
but
had
I
to go
don't.
to the Stanks. And then G2 was trying to play the Klepto Camille and everything to play through side
A
lane.
little bit, but you do have, like, for example, Jace Flex was really good, Urgot Flex was really good at that point. Like, you had actually a lot of Flex matchups that couldn't just be eliminated in draft. I can't fully remember the World's meta, but I do think if you're matching RNG in this kind of, like, bot thing, I think...
There was also Victor top as well, if you remember.
But that came in already like quarter semis, I think.
That's true. That did come a little bit later. You're right for
Yeah,
playoffs,
that did. While the teams that were qualifying figured out what the best parts of the meta were, which were the solo lanes, and Swain even came out. I think, like, I will die by the idea that it was a solo lane centric meta back then, and I think RNG got fucked by that. I think if you were matching RNG on that, then I would actually like to go back and look at your drafts and see if maybe that might have fucked you versus Cloud9, because these guys picked Singe. So I guess, wait, they did pick Singe. You guys had a tank matchup then?
Yeah, I was playing Cyan.
Yeah, okay. So
But
you guys
we actually lost the game where
they went for a counter pick on top side because it's solo lane centric meta.
Yeah, but to take your argument, then the first game we lost against RNG, we tried to play around top lane, and they tried to play around bot lane, and they end the game in 20 minutes because Uzi is just super fed.
I mean, probably, yeah.
It's just a matter of how well you play around this lane. It's not like you can take the result and be like, yeah, it was solo lane.
Yeah, but it's more efficient not to, because when they opted for that strategy in a protracted best of 5, even against a team that has, no offense, Jan and Wadded, if either of you two are watching this, a dog shit bot lane, they actually did lose over time. They did still snowball really hard some individual games in that series, but overall they lost, because when push came to shove, it was really solo lanes that had all of the power in that meta. Even in draft, like, the amount of shit you could flex on solo lanes in draft gave you such a fucking advantage back then. If you're going back to check, the final game was Aatrox and LeBlanc from Wonder and Perks.
I'm checking drafts because as much, what was the bot lane? Like, if they're playing Emedinger every time, of course
It was Sivir. It was Sivir versus Jin bot, and I think Wadded was on Braum, and I think Uzi's support was on Fresh because they did that fucking ward thing. I remember them doing that ward thing before I then really annoyed Kelsey by yelling.
I mean, yeah, I think there are examples for both cases when you watch IG and they are snowballing through top, and even us, the game we won against Genji the second time, we are trying to snowball the Urgot Irelia matchup, and sure, if you give one advantage to either of these champions,
you were solo
shit
killing the fuck out of Cuvée, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It all depends to coming from drafts, because there have been games where, like, the Sion against Camille is gonna stand up and just, you can actually snowball faster through bot, and some other games, Urgot Irelia for sure it's gonna snowball faster top lane.
There are some games, and again, like I think that the worst decision Rogue made was to stop leaving bot lane for later in the draft and picking strong bot lanes, because for some teams it can work and in some situations it can work. And I think on blue side there are a lot of windows right now, because there are some bot lanes that you just can't get pressure against if they're in, like Ashtarm, like Sivir, Lux, like stuff like this. And then you can play around that pressure, but very few AD carries right now are at the strength where they can be ends in themselves, whereas there are so many game-changing mid to late game carries in the mid and top lane that absolutely can. So I don't think you should prioritize. Yeah, you will open up tempo around the map doing this, sure, but I do think that you will get outscaled. I do think your mid game will suffer. I do think it will get much harder for you later on, and I think at the protracted best of 5 you'll just lose most of the games versus a team that recognizes a solo lane centric meta. Like Fnatic have gone really all in on this. I think them recognizing that it was a solo lane meta really early on gave them such huge advantage when a lot of teams didn't recognize it. And I think that if you guys do start going for this like Caitlyn Lux thing and stuff like this, maybe that works out now, but I think that players will just get punished again if you don't like get with the system. Although of course Riot could just throw in a patch where incidentally it does become a strong bot lane, which is what RNG, I guarantee, are praying for right now. But you know, they didn't win Worlds. The team with the Shy and Rookie won Worlds. I fucking wonder why. By the way. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, the Shy Rookie, Bolan, you're forgetting some players there. It's not 2-man roster, I think.
Okay.
The team. When we scream IG, I can tell you that the jungler is not a guy to forget about. Going 20-0 Gregas, but
True.
Well, especially because the worst thing, obviously, that must be about playing against Nick is, you know, if he gets the early kill, like, well, that's just going to be going. He's not going to like fucking take his foot off the gas pedal, is he? He's just going to put it down and then go to 5th gear.
Well,
either run over the whole game or go a brick wall.
The first game we screamed IG, it felt like they lock in Draven, Jace, and I don't know what, and it's just the fucking roller coaster. And how is it called in English when it drops like
Steamroller.
Steamroller, right?
There you go.
And they just push everywhere, and they just don't care if one guy dies because they still have the pressure, and they're just gonna take so much more on the other side. And we're so suffocated, and it's like it was the start of our bootcamp. So as well, we were losing many games, but it opened our eyes really.
Draven's an example where I would absolutely support playing around bot lane, which Origin should have done. I felt like actually if you guys had Fnatic, you guys would have fucking shut all over, because you guys would have played super fucking hard around bot side there.
Your microphone cut. What did you say?
What did you say at the start of the sentence? If you guys had done what against Fnatic?
Oh, if you guys had Origin's draft that Origin had against Fnatic when they had Draven the owner bot, like you guys would have shat all over Fnatic, for example. Like that's an instance where they absolutely should have played through bot side this split. But that's kind of like a rare champion where you can do it. Maybe Caitlyn is worth it. I haven't thought about Caitlyn too much. I'm not gonna lie.
Already you have to remove Zarakan, Yumi, Draven. It's already a few examples.
I don't care about Yumi too much. I would care about Xayah Rakan, yeah. I care more about the Rakan aspect of it, but I think the combo is still really, really strong, yes. But I think the combo is really, really strong because not only does it get pressure really, really easily around bot side if you play for it, but the Rakan is also absolutely disgusting if you let him loose around the map, which is what Fnatic have done with it. And now teams are having to ban that shit out versus them. So yeah, like I agree, it's brutally strong. I think it's the strongest bot lane right now. But again, I don't think it's an end in itself. It will always come down to that. So like we'll end up talking in circles.
I've got a team I want to ask about then, Cabo, which is the Splice team that obviously has done pretty well this split overall and had some big wins over top teams. Now again, Vizicachi, another top laner you've been playing for years and years and years at this point in time. Like, here's what's interesting. Veteran says it's a strong solo lane meta, but you almost never see Vizicachi playing the actual like hard carry champions. Like he seems to have a different mentality to how he's playing the game. So what do you think of Vizicachi at the moment?
I feel like they went back. I think during his time in Schalke, they went back to Stell. Like they were really ignoring him, but he was not able to create some of the leads on himself. Whereas right now, since I think the mid jungle is really good, they can create a lot of pressure. He can actually push some advantages from by himself playing Nico or something, and he doesn't have to get that far behind as he was like during last split. I remember when we played them Javan against On, they just ignore him and end up being super fed. And they create a lot of pressure with like Xerxes around mid. I think they play a lot through this, and then they have the safety with Kobe in late game.
Sure. What do you think, Veteran? Because I know the funny thing is, if you look at it, it does kind of tie into a lot of the historical aspects of Vizicachi. Like, obviously, he's someone where he even plays the matchups that aren't carry matchups, kind of like he thinks he's going to win lane, etc. He has that kind of mentality. And then I've heard he's supposedly like a shot calling presence on this team. Yes. So I would imagine that makes sense as to why he's kind of willing to sacrifice and figure he can play out his lane if it gives someone else the strong pick somewhere else, you know. So it kind of, like, the narratives kind of fit together on this one. What do you think of the way they use him?
Yeah, like, I mean, I've also heard that Vizicachi is essentially a leadership voice on this team. I do think that they will play around top on occasion. I think Splice's conditions for playing around top are basically, if the enemy's plan is to play around top, we will match that. Like, if it's a guaranteed plan. Like, Splice actually do have some very nice plans versus specific teams that have really easily recognizable systems. So versus Fnatic, for example, they actually matched the Hylissang roam timings towards mid. The first time it didn't work out so well, but Humanoid outplayed it anyway because he was expecting it. All the other times, Norskeren just headed off Hylissang towards the midsection, and they did try to get like an earlier gank in on level 2, which is very uncharacteristic for a team like Splice. Versus Rogue, they actually did play around top, and the entire draft wasn't really to counter Kled. I actually don't know what you think about the Gangplank versus Kled matchup. Like, I actually don't think it's like too bad for Kled, but it's a fine matchup, I think. Like, I think it's a skill matchup. But the majority of the composition did actually counter Skarner. So it was a draft that was playing around the fact that these guys with Kled Skarner will just throw Skarner topside after level 6 and just have him run it down with Kled's ultimate. And the whole draft was basically done with that in mind, to counter that 2v2 topside in mind. But I think unless the enemy team specifically does something around top, they're not really going to play hard around top, because they don't really play with early pressure as their priority. Like, they do play around the priority that they get early, but they don't really plan to win the game early, like, ever. Like, they're the opposite of Vitality in this regard.
Here's my analogy for you, Veteran, right? So there's a term in football, European soccer, where it's called, like, this I'm not applying the actual analogy, I'm just taking the name. There's a term that's a very infamous term. It's called anti-football. And it's basically where you just play like everyone except the main striker is behind the ball. You just defend the whole game. Basically, think of like how Italy has played their national team for the last like 30 years of fucking football, where if they score one goal, they're going to try and win the game 1-0. And you're just going to spend the next 80 minutes going like, fucking hell, this is ridiculous. I've got 10 people in front of me. So Splice basically plays League of Legends, Veteran. So instead of, like, for example, if someone ganks your top lane and you can see he's going there but you can't meet him, you go in the bot lane, you get something else there. If someone does something on one part of the map and they have win condition, you try to find the other win condition, so you still feel like you have. What they do instead, Veteran, is because they know all they have to do is get to 12 o'clock, the magic witching hour, when Cinderella, so all of a sudden, all of her powers disappear and she becomes just a housemaid again. What they do is they go, they have a strong top. We pick strong top. Oh, they're going to top lane with jungle. Go top lane as well, make sure nothing happens. And it's like they've just got a series of bodyguards and they've cushioned and put and nerfed the whole world until it hits that time. And when it hits that time, it goes ding, 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 ding. It's the magic hour, 35 minutes. Then they're allowed to play League of Legends. Like, right now, this is when we play League of Legends. And the other team's like, fucking hell, is this game ever going to end? And then they go, yes, now it ends. You like that analogy? Anti-League of Legends.
Yes, they just drag you into hell with them.
Speaking of which, I've just realised we're not really doing a great job of convincing these Splice management people that we don't hit Splice. I hadn't thought of that one, because you have to realise, Cabo, they think we really hit their team. I don't know why, because we've given them way more props than we've ever given your team, and your team seems to be vaguely cool with us as far as I can tell. So, I don't know, I think they're just taking that one a bit too sensitive, you know.
But playing against Splice, I can feel like they are trying much more actually to play in early game compared to, for sure, to last year, and even more than last split. And
yeah, I'll build that in. What they do is they go, right, for the first 7 minutes, let's go really hard, and then once it gets 7 minutes, have we won the game yet? Right, go to Thorin's plan now, anti-league. Right, that's it from there. You had 7 minutes to do it, you didn't do it, right, anti-league from here on out. Because that's the weird thing, you're right, Cabo, everyone credits actually that the early game got good, but they don't win many games off it feels like.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's necessarily a bad strat to be like we're gonna get disadvantages for sure, and then we just hold. Don't have to throw at least because we're gonna be in this state. I think it's mentality we're trying to get as well because we have been throwing so much. And as for I think in early game they had like the Kiana and the Gregas last week, right? They ended up losing the Kiana and Gregas was 20-0 on the other one. So I guess who was it already?
I'll double check. Let me have a look.
Let me check.
Yeah, it was the Gregas game.
Yes, you're right.
So that game, I think besides Kobe creating opportunities in teamfight with jumping in, their setup was better than the game against us, for example. But
I mean, I think you guys don't have like a specific enough thing for them to just develop a plan around, you know? Like, they just leave Kled open and they're like, okay, we know exactly how they're going to play. They're going to pick the fucking Skarner. They're going to play like this. We can just pick, like, Gangplank. We can pick Gragas. We can pick champions that can really easily buy QSS and itemize it, and doesn't just nerf their whole build, like Corki. Like, we can do this shit, and then we're going to play around these exact timings. You guys, it's like, okay, they're going to counterpick all our lanes, and then if we fuck up, they're just going to bore straight into our fucking Nexus. Like, that's not as specific a thing. Fnatic, you know, like exactly what they are going to do. They're going to trade HP bot to get a good wave state, and then they're just going to fucking send Rakan or send Pyke, whatever the fuck he's playing, one of those two preferably, towards mid, and then they go after their gangbang mid, they're just going to go top. Like, you know exactly what they're doing. You guys, it's a bit broader. Like, with you guys, you just have to, like, be good early game, and then you won't get rolled over. So I think they'll always have an advantage against teams that have really obvious systems, if that makes sense.
Okay. Right, anyway, that's as long as anyone should have to talk about Splice or play Splice. So here's the question I have for you. Right, everyone was giving a lot of props to Wonder in the spring split, especially like if people remember that's right after spring going into MSI was when Papa Smithy actually called him the best Western player entirely. So pretty big praise when he played for a team with Caps and some of the other guys they have there. What do you think of Wonder in G2, Cabochard?
I think he's really good. Yeah, of course. I think this split he has had many games where he doesn't have to actually play the game to win.
Must be a nice luxury, right?
For sure. There's been the victor or something, but we've seen that when they actually want to play through him, he's still there and he's still doing his job like good. So it's not a worry they should have. I think it's just that they are that ahead of the competition that they can allow themselves to do it. So I think Rondo is really good. I think he's better than he was last split.
Let me ask you this, right? Because
playoff last split, yeah.
If I was a top player in the league and I was playing against Wonder, right, I would do what I always tell Upset to do, which is like if I were him, I'd even start talking shit. I'd be like, Reckless, if I had your team, I'd probably fucking win LCS. You know, you go that way, you go like you do that angle, right? So here's the thing: Wonder is obviously an amazing player, but if I was you, I'd be like, listen, no offense to my teammates, but they aren't Mickey X, Perks, fucking Caps, Yago. How much more fucking help do you want? What, should we just bring in fucking Coleman to coach you as well? Then God himself to pick the draft? What the fuck more do you want? You know, like, he's got everything. He's like the little fucking boy with the silver spoon in his mouth, the little rich kid, you know, who's like, my dad gave me the new football boots, and you're just out there in fucking trainers trying to score a fucking overhead kick or something. Yeah,
but you see, Thorin, I'd rather just enhance my teammate and just win against them. I think that's my plan.
Right. Okay. You don't wonder to yourself what would happen if Wonder did in fact go back to playing on just a normal team? I'm not even saying a bad team, just play on a normal team in League of Legends. Like if he was on Splice, I'd love to see that. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and it's always something very hard to judge. You've seen so many players when you suddenly change one guy or one dynamic, it goes from 0 to 100. So sure. I think he would still be really good, but how good? Yeah, it's a good question to ask yourself.
I mean, I don't think he would be like obviously good, but that being said, it seems like the whole of G2 is just so intuitively good at each of their roles that he's not necessarily obviously good now. Like just purely based on the fact that if you give up like one kill to these guys, inevitably it seems like everyone just has to int into them, and like you guys know that pretty well from the first game that you played against them. Obviously this time you got your own back. It gets quite hard to judge them all individually from like a normal spectator.
Yes.
Like you kind of have to go pretty in depth into the decisions that they're making if you actually want to be able to judge them. Just because everything seems to go right for them, they seem to come in with like a mental edge every game, and as a result, Wonder's standing probably will like suffer for that because it's like, well, I assume he's fucking good. Like his team's always fucking winning. He seems to always be doing well in lane, and unless he's picked fucking Garen into Karma, how do you really judge it on a team like that?
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like when they need to have the moments and when they need to play the matchups good, they actually go to do it very well. So it's something to props them for.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, that's also the other thing that makes it hard to evaluate their team, isn't it, Veteran? Like, they do so much stuff around the map together that it's not like you just sat in lane getting 3 kills or something. And then secondly, there's the factor that unlike every other team where you might have the best player in a position, they don't just place, it's not telegraphed as to what lane they'll even play through. So it's actually a very unique team in that sense. Like, the difference is, even though IG has a fucking very good roster, you know they're going to play through certain players. Like, they're going to absolutely get their chances, and you can, as a result, tell by how the team's doing if that player's on his form or not, you know? Like, if Rookie's doing shit, they're obviously not going to be a top team.
Yeah, unless they pick, like, Draven, and then, you know, that shit's going south in every way, shape, and form. But, like, other than that, yeah, I agree. Most teams are, like, pretty telegraphed in regards to where they want to play around, and GT don't have to be. Obviously, they're like, flexing fucking everything, and you don't know what's happening. They can play around any lane. It's just, they're just, like, each individual player on there was already S tier in their role before they even joined that roster, and all of them are just intuitively good at the game. They can react to map situations very fast, very decisively. It's just, but as a result, it becomes difficult to judge each of them individually, because just if one of those players isn't the guy that intuitively reacted, then it's like, well, you're kind of getting carried this game, aren't you? But all of them have had their moments.
Well, I'd throw this in as well, right? It'd be one thing if they'd just gotten all these other players, but then they just still had perks as mid, and then they got, you know, like a good AD carry. Let's say they brought in someone decent, you know, right? That'd be one thing. They already have a super duper team, like you're saying, and then it's like at the end, they're like, oh, we just throw in Caps as well. Probably the best player to come from this region in a few years. Just chuck him in. He's just the cherry on top, you know. He doesn't even have to carry half these games. If he does, though, we probably can't be beaten. It's like, oh, that's reasonable. Yeah, very reasonable task to play against that.
I think talking about G2 as a team is always going to be more interesting now than talking about G2 as individuals, because I think every possible praise that could be given to the players as individuals has already been given. It's not something you have to argue with anyone. I don't think anybody... Well, somehow I saw people trying to claim that like Jankos wasn't that good a jungler this split, but I feel that that's just people are trying to find the flaw kind of deal in their individual
I'd
players.
love to see their fucking Yelp review for Jankos. Like, 2 out of 5 stars. Like, sometimes didn't have to hard carry the game. It's like, what the fuck is this review? Like, well, what was he supposed to do? It's like it's like he's the Uber Eats guy, brought your food on time, exactly the right order, and it was give the right change. Like, what more was he supposed to do?
Yeah, I think my rule from now on is I will not talk about G2 as like individuals unless something like baller fucking happens. Otherwise, I will basically just talk about G2 like as a team.
Now they're just a fucking gestalt entity of 5 beings merged into one.
And these 5 beings do this shit around the map, and
exactly.
That is what is interesting. Remove all nameplates.
They've transcended completely.
Yes, they
just
have
become one entity.
The setups that they do, like the setups themselves are very interesting, but the fact that they're so decisive around them basically makes it so I can just think, okay, in this setup, they will do this because they'll be so fucking decisive about it, and they'll probably be ahead of you on the map as a result. So, yeah.
What do you think, Cabo? I mean, to play against them, what's the experience like? Because everyone's seen, like, as an observer, when I watch some of the mid-game shit they do, I can see why people are drawing comparisons in history to teams like Moscow 5, for example, because when a team like that played, it's like every decision they made just worked. They were beating people in ridiculous fashion. Nobody knew what to do against them. Like, it's almost that helplessness I feel some of the opponents have.
Yeah, I think the first thing, it was interesting. Even the first game we played against them, or like it was the trend they were in. I think when they were winning this game is that they were, I think, down in gold at like 10 and up in gold by a lot at like 15 or something. So the transition between these 5 minutes was always in their favor, but you could see that teams had opportunity to just snowball from their lead. Even we had, I feel like, when we played Jace against Yorick, and then we ended up tipping bot chasing Yumi Pike and just throwing the lead, like just like Excel did, kinda. I feel like it was in our hands still to do something, but we didn't. And when we gave the opportunity to them to do it, they did it like 100%. And on top of that, they keep having all this flex in draft that gives them really good advantages everywhere. So
when you go against them in draft, do you is it difficult to guess what they're going to do next? Yeah,
it was fun actually. The last time we played them, it was The
Hi,
least amount of
Yumi.
time we spent actually just having a 5-man meeting or 6-man
There's
meeting.
no point.
My
Just
God.
go watch some Netflix show.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, who knows what's gonna happen tomorrow? And we're right, the Garen happened. So
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, you were right. Exactly. Yeah, it was a fool's errand. But put it this way: if you'd have thought up all these amazing flow charts, none of them would have had like Garen, because that's like the Doctor Strange one. Like, in how many drafts do they pick Garen tomorrow? So
no,
there's
but
only
okay,
one.
if it wasn't Garen, it would have been, I don't know what, like some other crap that we wouldn't have expected anyway. So
Would have been Ramos top or something.
yeah, right.
I'm fucking down for that shit, actually. Holy fuck. That's going to be my sign. Because now I can actually go to playoffs. Actually, Cabo, if there's anything you want me to do, if you guys meet them in playoffs, I'll throw up like a sign. If there's any sort of strat you want, it's all good.
Just give me an actual matchup. I want.
Oh, I have one thing I have to ask about. Cabo, one thing I have to ask about. If you're going to talk about playing against them and throwing, remember this game at the end of the spring split where Vitality was going to beat the best team in the world? Maybe it was going so fucking amazing in this game. And then the word throw, I don't like it to be thrown around. People use it too often, you know. This is one time I'm going to allow it. I'm going to break the glass and bring out the word throw. You can use it. This was a fucking ridiculous game. What the fuck was that game, mate?
Yeah, this game was. I have no words. Like they kept trying to gank up, and Jizuki kept rotating, and we keep killing them, and we have so big of a lead. And well, when Nashor setup comes in, then we're out of the game. So
The classic throat Baron.
yeah.
You have no idea how systematic that shit can be, Thorin. Like in HUK 2016, we had like 5 billion meetings where we were just trying to figure out what we do at Baron. Like holy shit. Sometimes that kind of issue just sticks with you. To be honest, we never really quite figured it out. Even at like the Korean boot camp, there was one point where probably just put up like a bunch of EDG VODs of EDG Barons, and we were just trying to like figure out if there's like a system there that we could copy or some shit. Obviously, G2 with Yankos apparently have figured it out, so there you go. It's all good now. It's all fantastic.
This video was kindly supported by Patrick Ribeiro, Penguin Off 9, Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Fat Guy got 24 ADR in an online qualifier, Lee Chaolan, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, JDubs, Chi Mao, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Alexander Rao, Kolja G, and as always, special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Now, do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Obviously, I have quite a varied output. Do you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Maybe you want teasers, see who the guests are on my next shows. Do you want to take part in a donator discussion with me about esports? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scrilluminati today. In the description box below, there's a Patreon link.